So this is the program that we created in the previous video, and you might be thinking, well, that's fine, but one of the things that quite often happens is that as they go along, the students create different functions at different points. So one potential problem is that you create function 3 later on, and then and you put it down at the bottom here. And what happens here is when we run the code, we will get an error. Let's see if it works. So it remembers function 1, remembers function 2, jumps to function 1, prints it out, does function 2, prints it out, so it runs that line of code, then it gets to this line. So because function 3 is now defined down here, when it sees the call to function 3, it doesn't know how to do function 3. The code's in your file, but at this point Python hasn't seen the definition for function 3, so it doesn't know what to do. So these function calls here are in what are called the global scope, and the next video I'm going to do will be talking about the scope of variables. But so these functions are all things that run. These function calls here are things that are run as we go through the code, because we get that from here to here, and then this is the first line of code that can be run by Python. And it's a function call, so it goes off and does whatever's in the function. So because the order that the function calls, the function definitions are defined in is important, because where it is in relation to when we call the function is important. What we quite often do is we create another function, and this function, for I think I said the other night, for historical reasons tends to be called main, and we say that main is where we're going to call all our other functions from. So it's a sort of a controller for everything else. Now if I run the code now, if I hit F5, save it, nothing will happen, because although we've got the function calls in here, this main function isn't called. So what the standard procedure is that the last thing you see in your code is a call to the main function, and we don't have any other code other than occasionally some variable definitions. We don't have any other lines of code that do anything if in here apart from one single call to the main function. Then everything else is controlled from here. So if I run it now, we should see something similar to what we got last time. It jumps about to the function. So this time it knows that main is defined here, function 1's here, function 2, function 3. So it calls main, jumps up to here, goes to this function call. So this function call jumps down to function 1, runs the code for this, even though the function call is before the function definition. Because we don't run any code till we get to this line down at the bottom, it doesn't matter. So it goes to function 1, runs the print statement, gets back from printing out over here, comes back to here. That's been that code's been run, so we go back to where it was called from, go down to the next one, etc. When we get to the end of this one, we go back to where this function was called from, which is here. That's the last line of code, so there's nothing after it, so we stop. Now there are variations of this function call. So one that the people who were using PyScript the other day saw is one that PyScript automatically creates this code. So we do an if statement that says if name equals, and then in brackets, and then we've got double underscores. So if the name is equal to that, then we want to run the main function. That's pretty much what PyScript creates. And then this should just work in exactly the same way as it did before. But what this if statement does is this is checking whether this program, this file that we've got here, has been run as the main program or has been imported into another file. And then this is a built-in function in terms of Python, so it's part of the internal structure of Python code. And this is saying, is the name that this file has been called with, is it main? And that's something that Python does in the background when it runs a program. It labels the program that's running, so this file, as main with double underscores on either side. And that what we say is, if it is, then we're going to run this function here. Now, one of the things we could do is we could call this function Fred, and as long as we call it here as Fred, so we name it Fred and we call it with that name, everything will still work. But when another programmer reads your code, they'll just look at it and go, why have you called that Fred? So it's the convention that this one is called main, not fmain. You don't need to use this in this sort of code. So this was a GCSE recap we were doing, so I would say just having code that looks like that is fine. What I often do is with students is I'll put a massive comment block at the bottom that says no code should be below this line, and then this whole thing is the last line of code that's in there. But if you're doing for A level, because you might be doing something more advanced, it may make more sense to have a block that looks like that. But all you need to know is that that's basically what runs the code. Okay.